Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our, we said it's spoiler cast, right? This is spoiler cast.
Spoiler cast.
Spoiler cast. Mini podcast, small podcast about Final Fantasy VII and the spoilers around it. So, yes, there are spoilers here. If you have accidentally clicked on this, I don't know what to tell you. It says spoiler like in the title. Like it's literally right below the video. It says spoiler. But I did get a couple people from the Spawncast. Jordan, I think, said he was showing up eventually, so you might just see him randomly pop up. But then we also have Shesez from Boundary Break. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You seemed very interested on Twitter to discuss this, and we had been kicking around ideas of doing something like this at some point. So I figured, hey, let's get together and talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake, the ending, and I guess the overall plot and where it's going at this point. So we can just straight up go into it here. Final Fantasy VII Remake is going forward. The series is going to be completely different from the original plot that we know. So it's not going to be the same. But she says you seemed very interested on Twitter. So what were your thoughts here?
Well, first of all, I think that the game is great. I do think it's good. The problem is it's the total misdirection that the entire staff and publisher Square Enix did to the fan base. I think, in short words, I'm sure we're going to have a lot more discussion about it, but in short words, I think that if it was marketed as an altered story, this would be okay. I do think that a remake should have came first. And now that we know that there's no remake at all, that's even worse. I do think that this is one of the most important remakes in the entire video game industry. It's not just a remake of Mario Party 1 or anything like that. It's Final Fantasy VII. So to not only not do that and also misdirect an entire fan base into buying your product, I find to be unethical. So regardless of the fact that I think it's a good game, I do think that, it's not a wise decision and it's not a morally correct decision either, I think.
For the marketing. So if they had called it something other than Final Fantasy VII Remake, like if they called it Final Fantasy VII Midgar, would you?
No, not even. Call it Final Fantasy VII Altered or something.
Well, I don't even think they have to go that far. I think if they just would have said in interviews and maintained the position of we're reimagining Final Fantasy VII, and it was just called Final Fantasy VII, similar like we see Capcom with the Resident Evil 2 remake or Resident Evil 3. They called them remake in interviews and publicity, but the games are branded just as Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 3, and they could have just done Final Fantasy VII. But they just had to be clear that it's a reimagining. This is a new way to tell the story that we previously told you 20 years ago. It's going to have new pathways and narrative. And I think that's where they wanted to take advantage of nostalgia.
Yeah, but even that's kind of I would say that even that's like a little bit misleading because it's like it's standing beside itself with how it's deciding to change the story. It's not simply just doing things differently. It's also working that into the story itself, which makes it like a completely different type of narrative.
Okay, so do y'all think they should have called it Rebirth, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth instead? Because it is, I feel like it's following a lot of the beats, but it's growing into a different direction.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Rebirth. Yeah. I mean, they use that box art on purpose. Like it is Final Fantasy VII
nostalgia
box art
vibes.
And it wasn't even coy. It was like they could have like worked in subtle things on the box to say like, "Hey, this is it's slightly different, but it's identical." So what are they doing?
Yeah, the remake thing, I think, that threw a lot of people. But that kind of works into the big twist, right? On one hand, you're going into it expecting the full remake, right? And then at the end, it's not. It's going to be going off on a completely different path. So is
literally remade the universe that we thought we knew.
So that's is the misdirection worth the impact of the twist, basically?
It's hard to. I'd say it's hard to know now. I think that's my thing. As a huge Final Fantasy VII nerd, my favorite game of all time, beaten it like 70 times and stuff. I like everything, but it doesn't seem like that payoff is going to pay off. Like at the end, when all of a sudden, like the shot that will not leave my mind is at the very end when you're fighting Sephiroth and he picks up the entire freaking Capitol building of Shinra headquarters and throws it at you, and everybody hops over it like freaking Tony Hawk on a skateboard.
That's from like Advent Children. That's kind of what they were doing there. They're throwing buildings and stuff, people.
It doesn't, because up to that point I feel like it was such a focused story, and at the last minute it just becomes Goku.
Yeah, it turns supernatural all of a sudden.
It got no word. That's what it did.
Yeah. So it's like, not only, and that's the thing too, is I don't mind. I do mind, honestly. It's like two separate issues. It's like, is it okay to have that weird level of contrast in the story? No. But I mean, like, even if it was just slightly different, even if it was still grounded, like, I don't want the idea of Aerith staying alive. I don't want like the idea of Zack being alive. Like, none of that's okay. Yeah. At that point, it's not a remake anymore.
The like, Zack thing is throwing everyone off. I don't know if there is, because here's my concern about the Zack thing and what they were kind of, because it looked like Aerith kind of felt something when she was walking by him, but Cloud didn't. Her facial expression changed and Cloud was just looking forward the whole time. I'm concerned that because Aerith is so in tune with like the planet and all of that, that there will be some sort of timeline interaction between them, and my concern is that Sephiroth is able to go between timelines. It's the same Sephiroth in either one. I am terrified that they're going to do that.
I think they kind of implied that, because the Sephiroth in this seems to be aware that he fails in the original game, and he's coming back to make sure the timeline goes the way he wants it to get his ultimate goal.
The thing you notice is that the Arbiters of Fate, they don't seem to be able to stop Sephiroth from doing what he wants. They can just reverse what he does. So when he killed Barrett, they weren't able to necessarily stop him. Like, they were pulling Hojo back from the glass to stop him from telling Cloud that he's not a soldier and all of these things. They never once could stop Sephiroth doing what he wanted to do. So I'm like, does that mean that Sephiroth just goes where he wants and then they try to clean up behind him as he does it?
I don't know.
I want to pitch something to y'all, and this is a theory I have. So I've done multiple playthroughs now, and I've gotten a chance to have it sink in more. I think that the Watchers of Fate are speaking directly to Aerith, and I think she can understand their language, because Aerith seems to know the future as well. Multiple times, Aerith says things she's not supposed to know yet. When she's introducing Cloud, she already refers to him as a mercenary. When he's confused, she's like, "Oh, it was just a lucky guess because your sword." Like, she is so familiar with him. If you get her in the dream sequence, she says, "You think you're falling in love with me, but you can't." Like, she knows that she's supposed to die. I think that Aerith already knows the entire original timeline.
Well,
totally.
Yeah,
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, because she says that every time that they were touching her, that she felt like she lost a part of her. She knows she was going towards death the whole time.
Oh God. Right. So it's very obvious that the whole, like, we discussed this before hitting play on the podcast, but I think it's very obvious that this whole new direction for the series is to just play with Aerith's death. I mean, the fact that she's aware that she's of the whole timeline and Sephiroth's aware of the whole timeline, that creates a conflict in which Sephiroth knows he's not supposed to stab her anymore, but she has to get stabbed. So how does she get stabbed? And we just have to wait and see. And like, I can just throw out theories. I think it's going to put in this weird twist where Cloud has to pick up the sword and he's trying to kill Sephiroth or something, and then he stabs Aerith instead. You know, like, she jumps in the way of it or something, and it confuses him, and he doesn't understand why. But another thing that I'm asking myself, too, is that if she's aware of all these timeline events, does she share that information with the rest of the party, or is she trying to keep that under wraps?
Well, I mean, from story purposes, she's going to keep it under wraps.
No, what if the calm in flashback, what if instead of it being Cloud telling the story of, like, the death of Sephiroth, what if it's her just saying, here's the entire next 2 months of your lives and how we need to stop Sephiroth? Like, what if the start of the next game just totally goes off the rails?
So what's interesting is Jordan never played the original Final Fantasy VII, but he beat Final Fantasy VII. You beat this game in like 3 days.
I couldn't stop playing it. It was really fun.
What did you think of the ending?
So after beating this, I know a lot of the story beats. I mean, you can't live in this world and not know some of the biggest spoiler moments of Final Fantasy VII. But I went back and did a lot of my research on all the other games, Crisis Core, and Average, everything that you can kind of put together to see what the missing links are and what changes from it. And once I did that, I do think that it has a huge potential to be way too convoluted and way too, like, hard to follow. Like, it could Kingdom Hearts itself in a way where there's too many. And I don't want to say that in a way where it's upsetting Kingdom Hearts fans, but it can make it not as easy to follow the timeline of what's going on, especially if Sephiroth can jump between timelines, and now there's a Cloud in one world who doesn't think that he's a mercenary because Zack's still alive, and one that thinks he's a mercenary because Zack is dead.
And this is exactly why this is a terrible idea. You had to do homework to figure out what's going on.
But here's the thing.
Not wrong.
If going into it without knowing it, I was enthralled in the story, and now with knowing it and having the context, it helped me to I honestly, it helps me enjoy the possibilities of what's to come. I like the story more knowing the differences, because this doesn't, like the name remake, like you guys were discussing when I jumped in, I think it does fit, but also doesn't fit. I see this game kind of feels like a sequel that's retelling events of the first game. It's like, here's the first game, and then it's like, all right, here's what you thought the first game was, and here's, let me take the blinds off, and then you can the blindfold off, and you can really see what's going on. There's a will and a way that the story's supposed to go, and every time it's defied, something else is getting changed. And when you get to the major changes at the end and what's going to happen, I think that, like, the next game, they literally have made it as clear as possible that this is no longer your Final Fantasy VII. This is a new story with the same characters, with similar story beats. Like, I still think we're going to get Sid and Vincent and all these other characters that have yet to be introduced yet. But I think they're going to, all their stories are going to be altered. Like, there's still going to be like an airship and all that stuff. Yeah. It's just going to be how it
Jordan,
goes about.
Let me ask you a quick question. It's Jordan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why haven't you played the original up to this point?
It was just a game I didn't grow up with, and then I never really sought much to go back into, because it's hard for me to get into certain turn-based games. They really have to be fun with turn-based combat, or a certain way it's done. Like, I'm playing through Persona 5 right now, and I love the turn-based combat. Pokemon, it's not like super complicated, and I just never got into Final. I guess I heard about it so much. I heard the spoilers. I never really gave it a shot.
So here's my problem with this remake, quote unquote, is that not only was it meant for fans like me who just wanted to see the visuals reimagined, the presentation reimagined to a timeless story, but there's also thousands and thousands of people just like you who never gave the original a shot because it's archaic by design. And this remake, to a lot of people, was meant to be that introduction to the series that they finally were able to have for a modern, modern etiquette, a modern sensibility. So the fact that they decided not to go in this direction that they were promising also betrays any chance that I have to be able to recommend this game to new fans of Final Fantasy VII. I can't say, like, you should play Final Fantasy VII, but play the remake because, it's easier to get into. I understand that the original one has really crappy graphics. It does. I can't deny that. And, some people just want to be able to hear people talk. So play the remake. I can't say that now because it's a completely different story. No matter what they do with it at this point, even if they just kind of like throw away almost all this idea of warping the story, which is not going to happen, it's still weird and different and slightly off key. And like, it's not going to be a representation of what the original story was anymore.
Here's my counter to that. Like, I 100% understand that. And I could see that in the perspective of yourself, who played the original and loves the original and wants that version and that game retold, just in a newer light. The one thing that it did for me is spark my interest in learning about it. Like I said, I did a lot of research, and I have a long backlog already, so I don't have time to throw Final Fantasy VII, the original, on the list. But it's given me interest to follow along that story as I play this to see the differences. So whether that's watching Let's Play, for someone else, they may go along and play the original to see the differences at the same time, or just play the original by themselves. But I'm like following and seeing videos and comparisons.
What's interesting
learning about it.
What's interesting about this is that the original Final Fantasy VII is about the same length as this remake.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. You only have to go like 6 hours into the original Final Fantasy VII to
the original
what we got to.
Final Fantasy VII. The average play, apparently, if you look online, is like 34 hours or something like that. The remake is like, it took me 31 hours to get through it, so it's like it's very, very close. But yeah, it's hard here because I do want to see new adventures with these characters in this world, but like it would have been really. The one thing we always dreamed about after Advent Children came out and after seeing that tech demo on the PS3 in 2005 was, what if they just did this game in Advent Children graphics, right? And it's pretty much not going to happen. Like, it's just going to be a reimagining of the rest, and the rest is going to be who knows what happens now.
What this indicates as well is that if they're going in this direction, it means we are literally never going to get an actual remake of Final Fantasy VII. In our lifetimes, it's not happening now. Like, it would be one thing.
I don't think it was ever going to happen, because Square talked about this years ago, that if they were to remake Final Fantasy VII in the way that we remember the original game, that they would disappoint fans. And I think this game is a product of that, where they just said, we can't remake it the way fans are going to want it. We're going to reimagine it. We're going to give them something new. Hopefully the gamble pays off. And I mean, based on the sales that we saw today, it has paid off for them. Now,
it certainly has paid off for them, but I would disagree. I mean, like, I have to understand that these people that make these games are people just like us. Now, they may have some level of insight that we don't have, but there's one thing that I know for certain, that remakes do work when you do it right, and they did not do it right here at all.
Well, it seems it's costing them a lot of. I'm sure it costs a lot of money to make this. Even if they remade the game, would you still be okay with them splitting it into parts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Yep. There you go. Go ahead, Max. What were you saying?
I want to do a direct counter argument. I think that the point of this, Shesez, because you and I are both mega fans of the original, but I'm much more accepting of, let's face it, the drastic changes that are made here. I think that this is basically trying to fulfill the mission of Final Fantasy 15. I put 100 hours into Final Fantasy 15, and I can admit it's definitely a freaking messed up game. But the entire objective of Final Fantasy 15 was to be the new introductory to the series of, hey, have you never played a Final Fantasy? You can pick up this. It's got guns. It's got modern controls. It's got open world stuff. I feel like Final Fantasy VII Remake is now trying to be that. Since Final Fantasy 15 failed, this is the gateway drug of, hey.
It does it so much better, too.
15 was the first Final Fantasy game that I beat.
Yeah, exactly.
It brought me into the series, and that's why I really like the gameplay. For one, I think the gameplay in Final Fantasy VII is
very good.
Incredible.
Hell yeah.
I love how the more time you put into it, the more rewarding it is. The more time you learn how to level up your weapons and place the materia and your summons, and then learn how to bounce back between characters and set commands. It just becomes this flowing wave where it's just very visually entertaining, and you feel.
Do you know what Do you know what I'm kind of disappointed with in this game? Well, there's two things. We didn't see any of the weapons in the game. Like Emerald weapon, Ruby weapon, no. I was hoping there would be something that would like point to it, whether it's documents found in Shinra. Like I didn't find anything like that, where it's like
cool.
Like there's this crazy stuff out there going on right now, because there was supposed to be. Which weapon like climbs up and they blast it with the Mako cannon?
So none of them are awake yet. Remember that they don't wake up until you get to the crater. Once you find that Sifra thing, that's when you see the eye open in the background.
I was hoping there would be some kind of them alluding to the.
They
better still exist.
Right. They could have totally put like research documents. Like clearly at this point they already talk about like the Icicle Inn Research Center already exists. Clearly they already found Genova's body. It would be interesting if they just had some sort of research notes or something that said like biological robot found. Like just even the slightest nod of like, you know.
Oh, that'd have been so cool. Because like seeing it like Emerald weapon going underwater with these visuals to fight this massive like just this massive enemy is gonna be insane.
What if we get new weapons? Because remember, the original version of Final Fantasy VII, when it came out in Japan, only had Ultimate Weapon and Diamond Weapon, and then when they re-released it, they decided to put in Ruby and Emerald. So it'd be cool if this time, what if we get another freaking weapon?
Diamond is the one in the cutscene that gets blasted with the Mako cannon.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's what it was. Yep. That would be a really cool scene to recreate too. But the other thing, I was kind of disappointed with this game. There's no ultimate weapons in this game, like for your characters. Like they're like they don't have them, and I was hoping that I was building up to like some mega powerful weapon that I would have, because you get that in Final Fantasy VII, where everyone gets their ultimate weapons, and they're all of a sudden you're hitting for all nines constantly, and I that never happened. There hasn't been a point in this game where I feel like overpowered. And that's, to me, that's like the late game thing. It's like you build up to where you have these crazy powerful weapons. Happened in Final Fantasy VII, the original, and just didn't happen here. So,
do you think it's on purpose, because technically this is only a part of like. What
Okay,
Final
so
Fantasy
here's the
VII
other
would-
question. I think this is interesting because I talked to Max about this. How do they work to the? Because we already know that they're going to have another couple of games. Maybe this could be a trilogy. Do you guys think it's going
I
to
think
be
it's gonna be a trilogy.
At
Okay.
minimum.
trilogy?
Minimum,
I think it's
yeah.
going to be.
I
I think
thi-
you're gonna
I-
see a lot of content from the original game cut in favor of like an all new story, and I think they're gonna work into 3
So-
games.
I think it's gonna be 4 games.
Okay.
I think it's gonna be 50 levels each, and I think it's gonna.
I was going to ask how do we go to the next game then? Do we take our characters with us as they exist now with their weapons, materia, everything, or do you literally like somehow lose all that stuff and start from level 1 again?
I think you lose that stuff.
Okay.
I think you
No,
transfer it
it's gonna
over.
carry
Interesting.
over for sure.
So you think we're
Or
gonna
you
carry over?
scale the enemies you'd be encountering into the next game, so you're
Well,
not going to be
consider
overpowered
this:
at that point.
PS5s are right around the corner. PS4 is on its last leg, like last 2 years. Like, how are you going to transfer that data? Maybe cloud data? I don't know, but like,
it is, or so.
Cloud data.
So one of the Final Fantasies already did this. When you played Final Fantasy X, 10 had the option. 10 remastered.
Why are all
let
these
you
games
turn-
like within
you
like
could-
arm distance to them?
I know you can turn your save file into a PlayStation 4 file, or you can convert it into a Vita file easily. It instantly did it.
Talking about Final Fantasy X,
What?
I was going to say real
Max-
quick, that CyberConnect was actually involved for a short time on the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and they already did a trilogy where you carried over your levels, and it worked really well, where you could basically do a ton of side quests while you waited like the 8 months for the next game.
Yeah.
And you never felt overpowered. You always felt reasonably strong.
see now because you brought up Final Fantasy X and it's sparked my mind. Probably Max and maybe Shesez would have been the two who caught this, but when you're in Shinra and you look at some of the pictures and the files, it alludes to Final Fantasy X2 with the Albed.
Oh,
Because in
no.
X2, they talk about how they want to convert the spirit or the energy of the far plane into an energy source, which is the Mako.
This has been a theory
there's
for a
also
while.
There's
Yeah.
also a photo in the game that has a character that's dressed
Yes.
similarly.
Oh, boy.
to a character
So
from Final Fantasy
they've
X.
actually have put this as part of Final Fantasy VII's
If-
canon now. So could we
Oh boy.
see them put the far plane into some
Yo,
role in
if-
these
Could we
future
not?
Final Fantasy VII?
Dude, what if like Orange shows up or something, or some wild thing happens in Final Fantasy 7 where a character from 10 shows up?
I wrote a video about this like 6 years ago. I wrote a super garbage video, but basically I theorized that Shinra in the future decided that like they'd never find Neo Midgar on Earth, so they left and went to Spira. So maybe, you know, it's funny that they're just laying those bricks again.
Would they
for the
really
fans
do
to
that?
theorize.
Oh man, and here's my
Well, they were
concern.
obsessed with space travel.
Here's my concern. Somehow, okay, so this next game that happens, let's pretend it's a trilogy. This next game happens. We play both timelines simultaneously, so we switch between them, right? Okay. We're playing one side where Zack is playable because, you know, marketing, merchandise, all this stuff, right? Oh, Zack's alive. You can play as him. I mean, how many people would be really... There'd be a lot of people excited about that, and they would sell the merchandise, all that stuff, right?
I thought, yeah, should
The other timeline is the one we know now, right? And we're switching between them, and then at the end, it comes together where both timelines fight together against Sephiroth. That is my concern, because that is going to be so complicated for no reason.
You know what? You kind of sold me on that idea. I'm kind of
that
down for a
sounds
split
real.
timeline. I'm kind of down to see what happens and changes. Like now that I am genuinely interested in knowing what happens with Cloud and Zack, because Zack is alive and Cloud no longer, you know, goes crazy and takes on the memories. You know, like he's not a soldier. Like. What happens to Cloud? Like, I want to know more about Cloud then. Like, what if in that timeline something happens later on where Cloud in that timeline dies and Zack is the sole survivor who then
thought about that
somehow
too, yeah.
goes over to the
Yeah.
other timeline. And that's the crossing over. So there's not two Clouds. One Cloud dies, Zack comes over to the new timeline and becomes part of that party.
I think what's going to happen is we're going to pull a Kingdom Hearts 2, and you're going to play like the first. You're going to play the first 1/4 of the game as Zack, and you're going
And
to
then the
rescue
other fourth on
Cloud.
the 3DS.
We're going back, baby. Yeah, no. I honestly, I think what the ending implicated was that. I mean, I don't know if you're going to end up playing as Zack. I think that's a possibility now, but
100%.
yeah, well, 100% for you. I just kind of interpreted it as like we're gonna see Zack in the game, like he's going to be playing a major role in the game, but like he's gonna come back, and what you saw at the end of the game was just time like changing in real time. So like we're in the present looking at something that's changing in the past, and so then the change to the dog mascot for Avalanche was something that happened
Stamp.
in real time as Zach was currently changing history in the present time. Does that make sense?
That's already like that's so convoluted already.
Yeah, I know. I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
Now, do you think, because there is a lot of people upset or not liking where this could go, and with all the feedback and them hearing that, do you think that they could kind of pull like a and slightly change things in the next game to kind of come full circle back to a Final Fantasy VII story rather than a new story?
I would hope they already have it all figured out before they started making this thing.
Yeah, I'd rather them, like, if they're going to go this way, you know what, you've already done enough.
Here's the best case scenario to me, is that the whole thing with Zach was literally just a nod and a send-off to his character for the fans of Zach, and they don't even pursue that.
That's not happening.
Well, the other if they have to pursue it, if they have to pursue it, they literally just make another game in the Crisis Core line, and it stays on its own.
You know what? This could be Square Enix's sneaky way of putting more Final Fantasy VII out there, because they're going to have their Final Fantasy VII trilogy or however many games, and they're going to have their Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core sub-series.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my god, they're going to make 17 games.
Bro.
Yeah, they're gonna pull another
make a playable version of Advent Children. Come on, we'd buy it.
I think
I would buy
it. I think Advent Children's going to be incorporated into this, we'll say,
100%,
trilogy, because
100%.
every time you see Cloud having his attack and you see Sephiroth on screen, Cloud is grabbing his left arm where the Geostigma showed up in Advent Children. So they're already alluding to that movie in this game in a minor way.
But I was just gonna say the best case scenario that they can make is to announce it next E3. By the way, you guys might have figured out we're doing an alternate timeline, but we're also going to be making, coinciding with it, a faithful timeline. Yeah, a faithful timeline. That would be great. That'll never happen. But that's the only way they could fix this in my mind.
How are they going to incorporate Dirge of Cerberus now? Is that going to be another subset of games they're going to make?
I think that's
Dirge of Cerberus.
What the heck was Dirge of Cerberus?
Dirge of Cerberus.
It was like a
pretty
Tron Galka.
Isn't that just like Vincent's
They pretty much
story?
just retconned that anyway here. They're not even going to bother with it.
Thank
Dirge
God.
of Cerberus doesn't count.
I just didn't understand
Just
why
wait
they.
and see when they can figure out that they can make more money.
No,
It's
that
just
was,
weird
that
that
was
they-
a pile
they-
of three-headed dog shit.
True.
That was a great pun.
I do honestly. My biggest theory is there's a lot of extended media stuff in Final Fantasy that a lot of people don't realize. Like there's a Final Fantasy VII book that is now canon. One of the characters from the book is inside the Final Fantasy VII Remake. There was a Final Fantasy VII anime that was kind of uncanonized. Of course, there's the sequels, there's the movies. I think that the point of the Final Fantasy VII Remake is to restart the timeline, but to also get all these loose threads and congeal them into one thing. And in order to do that, they are going to have to switch stuff around a little bit. So honestly, I think the biggest thing is part of the reason that they're doing that crazy dramatic ending is because I think they want part 2 to sell just as much as part 1. And they had to make the ending so insane that you're like, well, now you get another freaking price tag out of me no matter what.
Oh, that's how they're going to sell all the games. I think the ending of the next part is going to deal with the Aerith situation and whatever they decide to do with Aerith, whether it's not kill her, or kill her in a different way. It's going to end right on that note.
Oh, I know. It's
going to have her the whole game.
Be a cliffhanger of the sword coming down and then her eyes going wide and the credits.
Oh,
I guarantee you.
It almost feels like her whole character, like aside from like a couple story beats of her kind of like alluding to she knows what happens, is really building up like, oh, she's so cool. Look at her. She's so important. She's such a great person. She's going to die. It's really alluding to build up that emotional feeling.
That would be the weirdest twist, because they've essentially convinced a lot of us that Aerith is going to live now for the rest of the story. And what if they just kill her in this next installment?
It should be like at the intro, like Drew Barrymore and Scream, where she should be like, hey guys, we're going to go with this. Like,
as soon as the game starts, they walk
10 minutes.
They walk through another weird portal. Sephiroth's just right there and just... All right, well, she's dead.
That is
all right. Now play the game.
Man, that'll be interesting to see how if Aerith. What if she really does make it all the way to the end of the trilogy?
Maybe she'll sacrifice herself in some way to like activate holy.
Other people we don't think may die. You know, since they're not technically now they're not bound by the ghosts, kind of keeping the
That's
story
true.
going.
What if they killed someone else
Aerith
instead?
doesn't have to die.
You mean the allegory
Tifa's
for the
fair
fans?
game. Yeah, Tifa's fair game. There's other characters that could still be like Biggs is still alive. That's crazy. Jesse's glove is on Biggs's table, so in the hospital or wherever he's waking up. So maybe Jesse's alive, or he just took that as a memento. Either way, if Jesse's alive, maybe she ends up dying later. Who knows? I literally at this point, you can't say, "Oh, I know what's going to happen next in Final Fantasy," which I think is kind of why they did it. Like, we know certain story beats that they're going to have to follow along, but you can't definitively say, "I know how this trilogy is going to end," or whatever. How many games is going to end.
Right now, it became. This might be a poor example, but it's a Game of Thrones. You have the book series, and that's where we thought the show was going to go, and then all of a sudden it just went off the rails and it did its own thing.
Which could be good and bad, because there was good, and then there also was a lot of bad in that example, right? Because the show, for the most part, pretty good, except for a lot of the end. But hopefully that doesn't happen here. If they're going to go their own route, I really hope that it's as interesting as I'm making it in my head.
Yeah.
So when do you guys think the next installment's coming out? How long we wait?
2 years.
2 years.
Exactly.
Okay. Cross-gen PS4, PS5.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the third one would just be just PS5 then.
Sure.
At that point,
yeah, we're talking 2025 by then.
So we all agree. So I'm gonna put this. If it's 3 parts, this next one's gonna end with Aerith in the Lost City. If it's 4 parts, I think they're going to end the next part in Juno.
The way the trilogies work, the middle one has to be a bad ending, right? Isn't that how we would go? Like it has to end
that's
down.
how all great stories go.
Yeah. So hey, Aerith dies in the second one, and then the last one is Cloud finally going over on Sephiroth.
And again, I'm calling it now. I'm going to say that somehow they stop Sephiroth. Cloud has the chance to pick up the Masamune, goes to stab Sephiroth. Aerith jumps in the way because she knows she has to die. And then Cloud has to be like, why?
But what if Cloud from the other universe comes in and steps in the way and sacrifices himself to save Aerith, so that Cloud is dead?
You know what would be interesting?
It all makes sense.
And then another Cloud from another universe comes in and stops him.
Zack is there, and everyone's happy.
That's actually not a bad idea, because it could play into Cloud going into like his coma that he goes into, where he's like kind of comatose. He's like that because Aerith dies, and he technically killed her. That would be an interesting take on reimagining of the events that happened.
But we have seen like Sephiroth try to assume control of Cloud in this game, so maybe in the next one he does take control of Cloud, and Cloud does just cut Aerith.
I didn't even consider that, but Sephiroth has control over Cloud, and I guess that can be the catalyst, the reason why he has to pick up the Masamune.
He almost did that in the original. If you when he's holding the sword, if you press the square button fast enough, he will actually try and swing it down on her and stop before he does it. So clearly, like, Cloud had pretty much no control over himself in that moment. So I do think that
there we go.
Somewhere in an office, Nomura's like, "How do they know? How do they know?"
Yeah,
cut the feed.
Get me another timeline. We're gonna make this work.
Yeah, really. We need another one.
Timeline.
We need a third time.
We have to introduce Sora. And Mickey.
Oh no!
You and I. It's all songs they're playing.
Give me Disney. Mickey Mouse better knock that blade out of his fucking hand. Nice try, bitch.
So,
also, why is the same? I can't stop thinking about it, but like the Ghost Karis, the horse and buggy, it's the same fight from Kingdom Hearts 3 from Tangled.
Well, that was in the original game.
I know, but it's like it almost feels like for the rematch. I mean, it's not the same way you play it back in the day, but like how you play it now, I'm like, this is like the same exact fight almost. It feels like. I was like, Nomura, I'm on to you.
So is the second game that's coming up? You think that's just going to be them hunting for Sephiroth or chasing after him? Basically, is the whole idea of it?
100%.
It's like that combined with constantly feeding us this convoluted alternate timeline plot.
Oh no!
I'm curious. The weirdest part about all this is that everybody's seeing the future. Like, I feel like that's the weirdest part that's going to have to be dealt with, is like at the very beginning, somehow Cloud was having detailed visions of the plate falling, of like implying that Aerith's going to die. At the very end, he's seeing like ghost feathers and stuff. I feel like they're so heavily laying honestly, I think they're laying time travel bricks. I think that they're going to travel through time, if not just traveling through alternate universes. I do think that they're going to like go back in time and fight like Sephiroth in the Nibelheim reactor or something. I feel like they're just laying it on so thick of like, here's Meteor, here's one possible future, but you might not even get to it. Is Philly's what they just keep saying.
Man, it's just, I mean, if they do it right, it can be good, but it's such a fine line of success or a complete disaster with this type of storytelling.
So here's my take. I think that it at best can be good, and I think at worst it can be a complete disaster. But it can at no point be the best thing ever, and I don't think it'll ever go down in history as like something that's fondly remembered. Like 20 years down the line, the people that enjoyed it probably won't go back to it. And I think that if anybody does a retrospective on Final Fantasy, it's going to get left in the dust. I think for most people are just going to consider, you know, the numerical actual games. And this game is not that. It's something completely different. And so whether or not it is good, no, that's the thing though, is that I think that this game is good. It's just not, it's not going to be historical in any sense.
I think it's
not
yeah,
good.
I get your point.
I think it's better than 15. I think it's better than 13.
I've heard some Final Fantasy.
It is.
It's not. No, I think 12's better.
I've heard some Final Fantasy YouTubers say that they think this should have been Final Fantasy 16. They think that it probably would have been better to like, let's take this combat, maybe take the characters and make it either 7-2 or 16.
I do like
7-2.
I do like the combat. I actually hope they continue playing off this combat in Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
it's a great
fast.
combat system. Yeah.
I love it. I bear it with the punching arm now, and I just constantly just bum rush people with elemental weaknesses, and it's so cool that you can change it up so much. I love it. So
I mean,
much.
it is the best Final Fantasy that Square's made in a while, so I'll give them that at least.
Not a lot of competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes them a while to make these games, and unfortunately for them, the development for this game was pretty bad. So
You ever notice that it's whenever since Sakaguchi left, it's never been as good? Has anybody noticed that yet?
Yeah,
I like him a lot
actually-
still.
That's actually a good
Final
point to bring
Fantasy.
up. Like, this Final Fantasy 7 is no longer Sakaguchi's vision. Now it is Nomura's 100%. He just took that foundation that Sakaguchi left behind because he had to build off of that, and now he's just saying, I'm doing what I want with it. And
It's
that's
like
why we're all kind of saying,
the production of this game is Final Fantasy VI, and Nomura is Kefka. And
pretty much, yeah.
And Sakaguchi is Emperor Gestal. And now we got like some weird, it's destroyed, everything's ruined.
Yep.
like,
We're living out this guy's weird fantasy.
Like,
So
what
I
you brought up
think it's
earlier
Go ahead.
with the Whispers as an allegory to the original fans.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Oh,
It's,
you get rid
it's
of, like,
blatant.
And at the
Yes.
end, you destroy them, saying, "Hey, original fans, this is not what you want."
Yeah, and he makes you do
Yeah,
it. They make you do it.
All of your
Can't kill yourself.
It's a very obvious allegory, and I mean, like and that's why it's also weak storytelling too. I'm like, it's very obvious what you're doing here. It's not. I'm not able to inject, or rather, just suspend my belief and just think that this is actually happening in the game. I can't help but constantly remind myself that the Whispers are pretty much an allegory for the fans.
There's a lot of fourth wall breaking towards the end, where they're basically like looking at you like, "Hey, you're gonna mess up this story for us, all right?"
You have to ruin yourself.
The one thing they didn't do is wink at the camera.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's
yeah.
the only thing that was
Yep.
left.
So it's
I mean, like the ending words are like, the journey next has not happened yet.
yeah,
Like,
the unknown
it's
journey
all brand new.
continues. Will continue. Yeah.
All brand new stuff. And I think it's a good like kind of dichotomy where coming in from my perspective as I'm not attached to the original game and I'm not too familiar with a lot of things pre-playing it. So what I got was a really fun time with an intriguing story that I'm interested in seeing where it goes. And I'm sure you are as well. Of course, you want to know where it goes, but like for you being, having the memories and the attachment of where the original game was and the story, and this not being what kind of feels like was promised to fans, I can understand that side of things. I think that's just going to be the split on this game forever. Like I don't think there's ever going to be, even after all the parts come out, the full story's done, whatever they tell. There's never going to be that, oh yeah, everyone's in agreement, we all enjoyed this, it's all good. There's always going to be that split. I either enjoyed it or it's not the game I was promised. So
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough because there's nothing that we can really make a direct comparison to. Like I can't look at the 1932 Scarface and say, oh yeah, they remade it in the 80s. It's it's the same. It was the same concept, but it was a radically
What's
different.
what's the comparison
radically
you'd make?
different.
She says.
Mortal Kombat 9. This is the story of Mortal Kombat 9.
Right, because they went back and retold. Well, kind of, yeah, retold.
Yeah,
1
and like
through 3.
Raiden's like going through and he's like, I remember this. Oh wait, no, don't do that. You'll die. And it's like, oh, that fucked everything up.
So do you think? Do you guys think we could finish up here soon? But what do you guys think that these marketing twists are good going forward? Where it feels like they're building up to one thing and then they change it. Like an example, I guess would be Metal Gear Solid 2. Where they showed us nothing but Snake building up to the release. He's in it for an hour in the beginning, and then you just switch to Raiden for the rest of the game.
Can I be the first to answer this?
Yeah,
I think that that the bait and switch approach can be really fun and interesting. And when it comes to a sequel like Metal Gear Solid, for example, like you just said, maybe fans were expecting one thing, but it turned out to be another. But that's okay because we have no expectations as to what the story should be. It's just that it subverted us into thinking that, we're going to play as Solid Snake, and then, it's not Solid Snake. That's okay. And I wouldn't say that the game was particularly great, but I think that it's not the execution's fault. I think it's just the overall story that I didn't quite gel with. But I think that despite the fact that bait and switch can be a fun story like a fun story twist, this is not the vessel for this sort of thing at all.
Okay.
I think that Final Fantasy VII is incredibly important to the video game industry. It's historical because it managed to popularize JRPGs in the West. It also radically changed Japan's perception of what a JRPG should be. And it changed history forever for all regions. And the original is a landmark title that even if you're not a fan of it, you've heard of it, you know of it, it's that important. It'll show up in video game museums. It's that big.
Oh,
and
yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so it's in agreement with everybody who's ever touched that game that a true remake was welcomed and necessary because it has aged kind of poorly. Some in the writing, mostly in the graphical presentation, and in some parts like I'm sorry, I've already forgot your name. What was your name?
Jordan?
Me, Jordan.
Jordan, yeah, I was thinking Josh. I was like, it's not Josh. Jordan, his complaint with the gameplay. So, like, this remake could have addressed all of that, and it could have given it the new coat of paint that it desperately needs so that it can still be reintroduced to people going forward. This quote-unquote remake, and again, I'll just continue to call it the altered timeline, it's not that. And it's not going to be that. And the fact that it isn't that also indicates that we'll never have that. And so that's where I say it doesn't matter in this weird, exceptional case, if the game is good or not. That doesn't matter because what we needed isn't here, and it's never going to be here now because of this weird executive decision that Nomura made on his own behalf, on his own wishes. I think that if it was a true remake, everybody would have loved it. And now that they're going this direction, at best, there's going to be a division, and some people are going to love it, and some people are going to hate it.
Yeah, there will definitely be a division, yeah. But what's really funny is the game that we wanted the bait and switch on, we didn't get with Death Stranding, and the game people didn't want the bait and switch on, they got with Final Fantasy VII. Yeah. That's really funny. It's like, the Death Stranding we were hoping was going to be something completely different, and they were just like, well, we showed you what it was. It's like,
at this point, we got to stop. We got to stop speculating at this point because we're all on the wrong games we're looking at.
I mean, Kojima likes to troll people, and this time he's like, no, the game's literally pick up boxes and pee. And they were like, Final Fantasy VII, it's going to be that game we all loved. And in the first 2 hours, it's like, no, it's not.
It's so weird. Yeah,
I do agree that I do agree for the fact that maybe this game shouldn't have, in a sense, jumped the shark, right? It shouldn't have jumped away from being Final Fantasy VII as much as it did towards the later half, or with the whispers throughout the story. Because with the term remake, it's with any other formal remake that's out there, usually it's the same with minor things tweaked and changed to update, for times and all that stuff. When it's a complete different thing where it changes a lot of stuff, it's a reboot or a reimagining. So with the term remake, that's there to sell copies. It's not it really, the remake only applies for this maybe like 60% of the game, and the rest is all brand new stuff, new directions, new character lines, new. It's cool to see what was more expanded on, but I get like for me. Here's my example, right? Spyro is my thing. I'm sorry to have to bring up Spyro for anyone who knows my past with Spyro. With Reignited Trilogy, I was very on board with everything, and there's some changes in the game I disagree with, but it's only cosmetics to certain worlds and changes like that. The game is fundamentally the same, plays the same muscle memory wise, and I absolutely love it. It still is fantastic. I still love the originals more because they just tug at the heartstrings more, but I can play Reignited and not go, oh man, they really changed it on me. So I can hunt. If I was the biggest Final Fantasy VII fan and I played the remake, I'd probably be at an indifferent pass. I'd probably be like, well, I like seeing these characters, I like the way everything looks, I like the combat, but I wouldn't like a laundry list of things. And
that's kind of the thing. Is like if I play remake as its own thing, I can walk away from and say that was a good game. If I play it as a Final Fantasy VII remake, then it failed.
It's not a good traditional remake,
right?
If that makes sense. It's
as a
good
reboot,
game, but a bad remake.
Yeah, it's like a reimagining or a reboot of Final Fantasy VII, and I view it just as that. I can say, okay, I can accept these changes. It's just not the Final Fantasy VII I remember or that I had expected. And that, that's where they fail from the marketing and the messaging.
Right.
So that's where that divide is going to be is, it's a good game. It's just not the Final Fantasy VII that
if they were up front and called it reimagining up front, Final Fantasy VII, that name on anything, and if it was reimagining, it would sell, right? It would do great, but it wouldn't have done these.
They really wanted that twist so bad with that remake subheading.
If they were trying to be more honest, they definitely would have called it Revive or Rebirth for sure. But they purposely put remake.
Yeah.
So as a mega fan of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy in general, super obsessed with the entire saga, I kind of like that this is so different. And this will probably be a little bit of a controversial take, but I'm kind of curious what else they're going to swap around. I'm definitely going to buy and beat the next game day one. Even as it turns into 5 parts, I'm super on board with it. And part of it is because I'm also a horror fan, and there's an old quote by Stephen King where in an interview once they'd recently remade a Stephen King book into a movie, and it was a garbage movie, and they said, how do you feel about them ruining your book? And apparently he pointed to a bookshelf and said, no, my book's right there. It's fine. It's right there. It's safe. Like, they can do whatever they want with it. That's my philosophy is like the original Final Fantasy VII is still a freaking masterpiece. I still have like 9 copies of it. So who cares? Even if the remake ends up making it where like Sephiroth becomes Aerith or some weirdness, I mean, I'm still on board. Like, hell yeah. Let me see that Sephiroth cross-dress scene.
It doesn't ruin the original game by existing. It's its own standalone, complementary entry into the franchise. And if you treat them as 2 separate entities, I still have the Final Fantasy VII. I remember when I was a kid, it's still a masterpiece in my opinion. This new take, it's a good one, but it's never going to.
That was my philosophy on the Spuncast. That was the philosophy I was going with. I'm very open. You can remake, redo anything. I don't care. Even if it's my favorite thing ever, take it, remake. Like Jurassic Park's my favorite movie. Remake it, redo it. I don't care because if it's great, cool. Then I have another great Jurassic Park movie. If it's not, I still have the original, that's why in the same thing with games like a Spyro. If they ruined Reignited Trilogy and it was awful, cool. I still have the original game. It would have hurt definitely for sure at that point, but I would still have the original games. I'm like, okay.
I think I'm excited. I'm excited for the unknown. I'm excited to see where they go with the characters in the world and all of that. But I wouldn't have been mad about a remake, a straight 1-to-1 remake either with this combat. I'd been totally on board with that too, but I guess.
Well, I mean, that's what all of us thought we were buying. So,
yeah.
So if you went into it thinking like, I want this to be drastically different with buildings flying around and and I didn't get what I wanted.
Children.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think I'd be very shocked by that, but again, we'll always say that where it's like we'll have the original always, but that's again the thing is that they cemented that it's not even going to try to do anything to touch the original. It's like it's working off of it.
Yep.
So do we think that do we think part 2 is going to drastically sell less now?
No, I think it's going to be at least 90% of the install base. I think it's still going to be millions and millions of copies.
Like she says, are you?
No,
Are
I'm
you?
not gonna
Are you
buy
going?
it, no.
You're not.
Nope.
You're not going to buy part 2.
From an ethical standpoint, I don't plan to financially
Red
support
box
that.
it.
Oh, I'm buying it.
YouTube,
Rent it from a friend.
YouTube cutscene.
Come on by our spoiler cast. We'll tell you all about it in a second.
What's the keyword that was used? Final Fantasy VII full movie cutscene. Like that was
Yes.
like
Final Fantasy VII Part 2 movie. Here we
Just
go.
pull a
part 2 movie.
just pull a Scott the Woz and search up the ending online. Just
Gosh. Told us he
he's like, I
searched
played
the
5
ending.
hours and I
like,
just
my
watched the ending
gosh.
online.
He really did too, because after the podcast, he was like, "Let's talk about the ending." I was like, "What? You played 5 hours of it?" Gosh.
I have seen a lot of people say the same as she says, is that this wasn't the game they expect. They played it, they were okay with it, but they're not going to buy the next entry. I mean, I'm still going to buy part 2. I want to see where they go with the story, how much crazier it's going to get. What's Nomura really going to do with these characters? Is Barrett gonna all of a sudden become a god in the game? Is Cloud not even going to play a role?
You know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen, right? That's the final the launch trailer is going to drop, and you're going to see right at the end, instead of Cloud stepping it, or I'm sorry, Zack stepping into frame at the end, you're going to see Tita step into frame.
Oh my god!
That happens. If they try to bait and switch us again with the second entry, it's not going to work.
What if
I already know what you're up to?
What if both Clouds enter the same dimension and they fuse to become like an ultra powerful new character?
Oh my gosh!
Super.
It's like Alpha Cloud or something.
I
He's
think-
just like a really cool.
I
character.
do
He has
wonder-
2 Busters.
I do wonder if just the idea of it being like this, it's going to be this ridiculously good looking game on the PS5. So I wonder if that'll also
no
sell
doubt.
people too. Like they'll show up and they'll be like, "All right, this looks crazy."
PS1 doors.
I just
See,
got
you say that, but like PS4 is also a graphically capable system, and yet we got JPEG backgrounds. And stuff
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
true. That's true. I think a lot went into the character models, but like those.
I don't know.
Oh
I
my
feel
God,
like
yeah,
that's
they're
like,
gorgeous.
There's some charm to the way they look.
But-
Like they look great, but it almost looks like it's if you took the picture of the PS1 and tried to make it HD. It just has this weird like nostalgic look to it, but I don't think it was.
Oh my
on
god!
purpose.
Did you just defend the JPEG image?
No, I didn't. No, I said I think it looks it looks fine to me, but I don't think it was done on purpose.
But
I think they just
the world building of the next one very well.
I gotcha.
The world building could change completely if you're going to the PS5 with the SSD, and then they don't have the, those scenes where they're like, slow down, hold on a second, let's crawl through this area.
My favorite. When I went to go talk to the Shinra kid, and I hit the triangle, and it's like 5 seconds. They're just staring at each other. It's like, hey, Cloud.
But those parts where you have to squeeze through these areas so they can load the next area. Those
my favorite is when it
defend
determines.
that.
I like how it determines how. All right, in this area you can walk for a bit, and then we'll let you lightly jog, and then you have to walk again for a second. Like you can't control your speed. I'm like, I just want to get over that.
Those things.
I had someone defend those sections.
Or having to walk up.
They're like, that's
walk
city
up
life. You
59
have
stairs.
to walk in to slow down. I was like, no, I've never been in a city where I can go from running to I have to walk to when I'm going to an alley. I have to slide.
Especially when you have like a 10-foot sword on your back.
Oh yeah.
Those are the worst, right?
Do we really need to do the 59 stair climb?
Here's like, okay, so now that I kind of got what I considered an important thing, like this is just the one thing that was like, this is a weird change, and I don't appreciate it. Because most of the remake I actually do really enjoy. But like that one thing where you're forced to do the staircase thing, that was a gag in the original game for cowards. You're supposed to go in guns blazing and just deal with, the challenge of the combat. But like if you want to be a wuss, you can waste your time running upstairs. And that was the joke. And this game doesn't allow you to make that choice, which is so weird. So it kind of like stripped away the joke aspect of it and just forced the joke part on you. I was like, that's okay. Yeah. That's the one thing in the remake outside of the, the twist ending that I was like, that wasn't a good decision.
The commentary there was probably more annoying than doing the stair thing, especially with the speed of your character walk. Sometimes Cloud's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna breeze up these stairs," and sometimes like, "No, I'm gonna saunter. I'm gonna walk." And then Barrett's like, "Hey, wait up!" And then he'll pass you and be like, "All right, I'm gonna slow down." And then Tifa's all the way at the top. She's like, "Where are you guys?" I'm like, "What?" And then you get up there and you go for a breather. That breather lasts like 5 minutes. You just stand there going, "Oh," for like 5 minutes, and you can't do anything about it.
The sense of urgency in this game was really oddly paced.
Well,
we have to do this really, like we have to do this right now. Like, yep, it took me about 5 hours to get to the 5th reactor because I had to turn off lamps and look at a fan for some reason. Like, okay, game.
At the very end, when you're supposed to go save Aerith, there is several hours of side quests. If you do all 9 side quests in Chapter 14, which I redid today, it takes a couple hours. So it's really funny to think about them being like, we really need to save Aerith. All right, we've got the motivation, we've got the permission, I've had my dream sequence, let's go up on the plate. And it's like, all right, let's spend another 4 more hours walking around.
Yeah,
Well, I remember, like,
there's an art form to adding in, you know, extra content and avoiding the word padding, and this game doesn't hit that all the time. I think
You don't want to find 3 cats?
right. So
I
I
did
think
that by mistake.
you
Yeah,
don't
I was
want
forced
to.
to.
now.
You don't want to feel like it's like, okay, this is the goal, and then the game developers grabbing you by the arm and be like, well, hold on a second,
Yeah.
why don't we take a look at this fan? And it's like,
Wait,
no, no, I want to go to the plate. Give me, let me go to the plate.
There are some times where it felt like the areas just went on a little too long. Yeah, I definitely felt that at times.
But
Climbing up
that's
after
something
the plate.
that's something they
So-
can work on in the next game for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's legitimate. Like for the direction they're now going, you know, taking my opinion aside, like if to suggest what they can improve in the next game, they need to hide the padding a little better. They need to
Yeah.
integrate it a lot.
I feel like it'll
smoother.
be easier since they don't have to follow a set path anymore and be like, okay, well, I think we can make this section longer here because they're traveling between this spot and the previous one. If they just, you know, make this original story now, they can pretty much have it set up exactly how they want. So
Maybe with loading and rendering times, they won't have to do the slow down or crawling stuff because it's on new hardware.
yeah, that'd be
So-
interesting. It's gonna be fun to see it on the PS5 and let's be honest, Series X. So, but that was our spoiler cast for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Thanks, Shesez, Boundary Break. Where can the good people find you?
YouTube.
YouTube, very good. I got everyone linked down below in the description. You know, Max, Dreamcastguy, Jordan Fringe, and then we have NateTheHate, and Direct Feed Games, but mostly NateTheHate. Mostly NateTheHate though.
Mostly NateTheHate.
Mostly
That's
Only
maybe
NateTheHate.
twice a week.
You're only NateTheHate.
Only Nathan.
That's the really interesting channel though, because you have you're there discussing things with MVG.
Yes.
Yes, there we go.
And
Okay.
I always
But
remind people.
thank you for having
endorse
me on though. By the way,
It was fun. It was fun talking some Final Fantasy with you. And we'll see you guys next time. Let us know what you think about Final Fantasy VII Remake down in the comments. I'm very curious to see everyone's opinion on this. And we'll see you guys next time.